Hi, I'm Gareth Green, and in this video we're going to be thinking about conjunct and disjunct melody writing, which may sound very complicated. Actually, it's not at all complicated. So what do we mean by conjunct and disjunct? Well, when we're writing a melody that features conjunct movement, we're talking about using neighbouring notes. So if I start on C and then I go up a note to D and I come back to C and I go down a note to B and down a note to A, down to G, come back up to A, up to B, up to C, that's a melody that's made up entirely of conjunct movement. So we're just literally going to the note above or the note below in each case. It's perfectly possible to write a melody that works entirely in conjunct movement. And it sounds all right. Well, let's have a look at whether that's true or not. I've written one here that's made up entirely of conjunct movement. Have a listen to these 4 bars or 4 measures. Now, whether you like the melody or not doesn't matter, but you can hear that it works. As a melody, there's nothing really wrong with that. Now, the only problem is that we've done that for 4 measures or for 4 bars. What would happen if I wanted to write a piece of music that had 40 bars or 40 measures or 400 measures, 400 bars? If I did the whole piece in conjunct movement, I think it would sound pretty tedious after a while. So you'd be thinking, oh my goodness, it's just going up one, it's going down one, oh, it's gone down another one, it's come up one. And you soon get fed up with a melody. So there's nothing wrong with conjunct movement. And you can sustain a fairly short passage of music using only conjunct movement if you want to. But if you want to go on to something longer, well, you might need to think about varying it. Okay, now at the same time, what about disjunct writing? Well, disjunct is when you're leaping, so anything more than a next door neighbour note. So if I start on C and I jump up to E, or I start on C and I jump up to F, or C to G, or C to A, or C to B, or C to C, and so on. Or if I have leaps going downwards. That's all giving us examples of disjunct movement. Now you might think, well, I suppose if a melody is leaping around all over the place, that's not going to work terribly well. Actually, it can work quite nicely. Have a listen to this, which is another example I've written of a melody that's entirely using disjunct movement. So we haven't got any neighbouring notes at all. We're leaping around the landscape. So this is how this one sounds. Now again, whether you like the melody or not doesn't matter, but you have to say, actually, that works all right. You might think it sounds a bit like a bugle call or something, but there's nothing wrong with that melody, is there? Same problem though. If I were to extend that into a longer piece that carried on using disjunct movement from start to finish, I think I'd feel as if I'd been on a kind of musical roller coaster, you know, being bounced up and down all over the place. And just like those roller coasters, you get to a point quite quickly where you start to feel a bit ill. And that could happen if you write a melody that's entirely using disjunct movement. So if you're studying music and you're being asked to analyze how a melody is working in a piece of music, well, one thing you can talk about is what's the balance between conjunct and disjunct movement? Does this melody mainly feature conjunct movement or disjunct movement? Or where does the disjunct movement come in the melody? And how does that disturb the conjunct movement elsewhere? You know, so you can talk about all that analytically all the way through a piece of music. But I'm really focusing here on people who are writing music thinking, oh, have I thought enough about conjunct and disjunct movement, and which I'm trying to do in any given situation, and whether I need to balance these two things out? Because what I've come up with next is a melody that includes a mixture of conjunct and disjunct melody writing. So before we talk about it, have a listen to this melody. See what you think of this one. Okay, now, does that work? I think it does. It's got a real balance of conjunct and disjunct. And I've purposely tried to compose a melody there where the disjunct movement is really obvious. I mean, if you look at these first two notes, they're a six apart, 6 notes apart. That's quite a big leap. And then I've got another leap of a 6 going on here. I've got a smaller leap here, and it's a leap going down, a third. And then I've got an upward leap of a whole octave. And then here we've got an upward leap of a fourth. And then we've got a downward leap of a 6. And then there's a smaller leap just near the end where we come down a third. So you can see there are some smaller leaps, those thirds that we've talked about, but we've got some pretty big ones as well, haven't we? Especially these 6, the octave and so on. So if you kind of just leap about too much, it can sound really disjointed. If I do, you can hear, you can't really make a lot of sense of that because it's just leaping around too much. So one thing to bear in mind is this, that in many cases, especially if you're wanting to sustain a melody over a reasonable length song, piece of music, whatever you're wanting to write, it's not a bad idea to have a balance between conjunct and disjunct movement. One little tip is this. If you're going to have a leap, especially a significant leap like this rising 6 at the beginning, it's often quite a good idea to have conjunct movement following it that comes back inside the leap. So do you see what I've done there? I've got G at the beginning going up a 6 to E, and then I'm going by step inside that leap. You know, if you have a big leap, and then you have another big leap in the same direction, you can feel, oh gosh, that's feeling really disjointed now, isn't it? Even if you have a small leap, if I go from here to there and maybe go up a fourth, it's still feeling a little bit disconnected, isn't it? But if I go up a 6 and then I mitigate that by some falling movement by step, you think, oh, actually that sounds all right. You can even do things like have repeated notes, which is what I've done here. So I get to that A, then I say, let's have A again. You can have design within your melody. So if you look at this bit, actually what I'm doing then is to take that same idea and restate it here a note higher with just a little change to the rhythm if you compare that rhythm to this. So it's all coming a note higher, but it's slightly modified, so it's not obviously the same thing again. I could have done the same thing. That's okay, isn't it? But just by making a very slight change to the rhythm, it becomes slightly less predictable. But we recognise the pattern. We kind of heard, oh, this bit starts with a rising 6. So does this. And the rising 6 is a note higher, which just increases the tension of the melody a bit. And then we have these falling notes inside the leap, as we do there, but not entirely predictably because the rhythm's very slightly different. Now, if I just carried on doing the same pattern, rising a note every time, it will be a bit obvious, wouldn't it? So then I've decided to change direction. What I've done here is to have that bigger leap. So we've got used to a rising 6 there and here. So let's really go for a big leap now of an octave. So that's quite a big leap to go. But notice again, I've got this idea of descending conjunct notes inside this octave leap. And then for the highest note of the phrase, this note here, this top A, I'm having another ascending leap, but I'm making it not quite as dramatic. We've had 6, 6, octave. Now we're going to have a fourth. So not quite so dramatic this time. Now, if we always have a leap and then we go by step inside the leap, well, that can be a bit obvious. So maybe sometimes we want to vary that. So here I've written a rising fourth, and then I said, well, actually we've done that. Let's now come down a 6. So I've got a leap upwards of a fourth and then a leap downwards of a 6. Sometimes if you are going to do that, it's better to have one leap in one direction followed by a leap in the opposite direction, so we don't keep leaping in the same direction. You can get away with it in places, but it's another way of writing a melody that kind of makes a bit more sense. And then having gone up a fourth and down a 6, I'm thinking we now need a bit more stability. So even though there's one leap of a third there, otherwise we're pretty conjunct. So you can hear that if we have a melody that's entirely conjunct and goes on for too long, it's going to be a bit boring. Actually, people are going to switch off and not find it very engaging. If we have a melody that's disjunct all the time, people will disconnect for different reasons because they just can't kind of keep up with the thing leaping all over the landscape. So ideally, what we're looking for is a mixture of conjunct and disjunct movement in a melody. And this idea of thinking about, if we have a big leap, how do we mitigate it with stepwise movement coming back inside the leap most of the time, but not all of the time. So you've always got this sort of sense of we're making it intelligible for the listener, but we're not making it too predictable. This is nice and cohesive because it's the same kind of rough idea twice, but there's a modification to it. Then it's kind of varied in the second half, but I've still got this falling 3-note thing that I had here. And I've still got this rhythm that I had in these other places. So there are things that connect you with other parts of the melody, but really we've also got this kind of element of unpredictability and a really good balance between the conjunct and the disjunct melodic construction. So if you're analysing melodies, well, it's a good thing to be thinking about in your description of what's going on. If you're composing melodies, it's really good to think about the balance you achieve between conjunct and disjunct melody writing. Well, if you've enjoyed this video, which I hope you have, then you might want to go to our website and have a look at things that might help you take this forwards. So the website is www.mmcourses.co.uk. And if you're a composer, we have a composition course there, which just kind of goes through the essentials of composing. So, you know, you might be fairly new to it, or you might have done it for a while and you're sort of struggling with a few things. That course might be really useful. So if you go to the website, click on courses, and then find the course entitled Composition. That would really help you to write stronger melodies, as well as thinking about the chords that fit with them and how to go about all of that task as well. So there's just an idea. Lots of other things on that website for you as well. So have a good search around. www.mmcourses.co.uk.